Hi, everyone, and welcome back to On the Right Side of History with Kansans for Life. I'm Danielle Underwood, your host. Today, I'm speaking with Brian Westbrook, founder and executive director of Coalition Life, based in St. Louis, Missouri. His organization works to defend life through peaceful prayer, sidewalk counseling, and pregnancy resources at locations in Illinois, Missouri, and most recently through a local team in Overland Park, Kansas. Welcome, Brian, and thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Danielle. I appreciate the opportunity.
So one of the interesting things I find about the pro-life movement is that there are so many important roles for people and organizations who are willing to engage in this most important human rights issue of our day. And, at Kansans for Life, we focus a lot of our efforts on education and outreach in the pro-life space, and along with advocacy in our state house for stronger protections for life. And yet we are so grateful for the important contributions of our friends and allies who are working and fighting in different ways than we are, but to the same goals, really for protecting both women and babies from the abortion industry and also protecting against other threats to life. And so my opening question for you, Brian, is what unique role Coalition Life plays in the pro-life movement?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me on the broadcast. Appreciate it. So Coalition Life was started back in 2011, specifically with the goal of going out and talking to women who are about to have an abortion. So go out to the sidewalks, either hold prayer vigils or do sidewalk counseling. And soon after that, we decided to make it a professional position. And so we started hiring college students, and some of them are retirees and people who are, we're competing against Starbucks or McDonald's or something else. And so a college student who needs a few bucks back in their pocket, but is passionate about the pro-life movement, we started to bring these people on, and we realized that having a professional position doing sidewalk counseling was a big impact, because instead of having a couple of hours a month, they're spending 15, 20 hours per week doing sidewalk counseling, learning what's happening out there, perfecting those conversations and having some really tough conversations out in front of these abortion facilities. So that's really, kind of our unique proposition, is that we are bringing professional sidewalk counseling to these abortion facilities now in 3 states, as you mentioned earlier. And then backing that up with our own pregnancy center we call Women's Care Connect. So a lot of times, again, around the country, incredibly well-meaning and very passionate individuals around the country are doing this sidewalk counseling, yet it's tough to back up some of those promises out there, right? And so that's what we did. We started our pregnancy center that will follow up with every single person we meet out there, call them up, how can we help? And we now have clients from 24 different states who are either flying or busing into mostly Illinois, but also other states they're being flown in.
Interesting. So you're offering pregnancy resources to women from 24 states, you said.
Absolutely.
So this is not geography-bound work you're doing.
No. And in fact, our long-term goals coming up very soon here in November, we are launching Coalition Life Circle, which is a 9-day prayer for life, and it'll be offered in all 50 states. But yeah, the clients that we serve are currently in 24 different states, and it's really as a result of Post-Dobbs. And I think we were going to talk about that here in a minute. But Post-Dobbs, these clients are being flown all around the country. And so, Texas, Tennessee, Louisiana, Kentucky, Indiana, these kind of states, they're flooding into mostly Illinois, but some now in Missouri, and then also some there in Kansas. And so these states have now become destinations in the abortion industry, and some big employers are also paying for this travel cost to have abortions.
Yes, that's definitely right. Kansas has become a huge destination state for abortions, sadly, for our state. The first thing I want to say is I think that it's particularly courageous, these individuals who go out and are willing to have these very tough conversations with women and truly be that last line of defense. And I'm just wondering, how is your team approaching that conversation differently than what others might be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things we did when we went out to kind of figure this out. So I come from my background is I worked at a local engineering firm. We did food, beverage, and pharmaceutical work and electrical design. And really, what we saw when we were doing that work is like we wanted to break problems down to their least common denominator. So it was called troubleshooting. Like the actual common term was troubleshooting. So when we looked at sidewalk counseling, our early team, we said, well, how can we troubleshoot sidewalk counseling and break it down to its least common denominator and say, what exactly can we do or not do? And I think one of the things we decided to do is mostly focus on what not to do. So most pro-life work in front of abortion facilities is holding signs of pretty babies or ugly babies or aborted babies, or those would be the ugly ones. But what we found is that if we just start from scratch, start from a white paper and say, what exactly would I do out in front of an abortion facility if I didn't have any other knowledge of what was happening out there beforehand? And frankly, that's kind of where we were at as well, because, I didn't grow up pro-life. I didn't grow up in not that we were pro-abortion, but we certainly didn't talk about the subject very much. And so we kind of went with a blank canvas and said, what are we going to do out here? And really, it's about asking very specific questions, being inquisitive and curious why they're out there at that abortion facility, instead of saying, don't have an abortion. Well, they might not be there for an abortion, right? Instead, it's like, hey, what brings you here today, right? And then by the time we establish some level of relationship, at that point, we can start offering them services and some other place to go. And that relationship building, while very quick, is very, very critical in being able to get them to leave, turn around, and ultimately choose life.
Very interesting. And how many turnarounds has your organization seen at this point? I've seen the numbers on your website, but I have a feeling that those are constantly going upward.
Oh, they're constantly, the last I've seen is more than 4,600 turnarounds since we started back in 2011. And my team continues to update that number. So by the time this broadcast, I'm sure that number will be higher. And we have a lot of fun out there. And yes, so what I would say is that statistically speaking, we have about a 1% turnaround rate. And so across the board, these are outbound, these are inbound, these are also the delivery driver. All the junk data is thrown in there as well. But we have about a 1% turnaround rate per encounters. Every person we attempt to talk to, 1% of those will in fact leave and ultimately go see a different pregnancy center, get a pregnancy test, but ultimately leave that abortion facility in hopes of choosing life.
And every one of those turnarounds is a victory.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's a huge victory.
Very interesting. Okay, so we all know that there was a giant landscape shift in 2022 when the U.S. Supreme Court issued its Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade. I know that, every organization working in the pro-life movement saw impacts from that. And I'm just wondering what you all saw in your work since you started, you said 2011, is that correct?
Correct.
And then, in 2022. So you had 11 years of work in this, and now, we've had 4 years since then. What changes have you seen in that time, and how have you addressed it?
Yeah, great question. I appreciate it. So the pro-life movement, I think, was a little caught off guard that Roe versus Wade was actually overturned. A lot of the colleagues I work with on a daily basis, there was some kind of internal bets whether or not the Dobbs decision would go the way that we thought it would go. But now here we are. We're post-Dobbs. And what exactly has changed here in the last several years is really, and we mentioned it earlier in the program, but that clients are moving and they are being flown from place to place. But most of this airfare is actually being paid by the abortion industry, but only in a one-way ticket. And this is, I mean, we were shocked post-Roe as this started to happen, in that they would fly these clients. Most of them are from Texas, Louisiana, Kentucky, to mostly Kansas or Illinois. And so they're flying these clients in. And then when we talk to them on the sidewalk and we say, look, we can help you, these kind of different things. And they say, yeah, I'd like to, but I don't have any way to get home because they only booked a one-way ticket. I mean, to me, that's blackmail, right? You know, we're going to get you here, and now you have to put up a couple $100 when they really don't have any money to begin with, just to get back home, not to mention the hotel stay, not to mention the, you know, Uber ride or some kind of taxi ride. It's crazy. And so we end up having to pay a lot of these expenses out of our budget for bus tickets, train tickets, and of course flights to get them back. And then once they get back to Texas or some of these other, you know, places, well, then what? And really being able to work with other local groups, or just flat out paying some of these bills for them so that they can get out of abusive relationships and out of these, you know, circumstances that push them into having the abortion to begin with. So some of my colleagues in the pro-life movement would attribute the chemical abortions to the Dobbs decision. I actually think that was a trend that was already moving in that direction, that chemical abortions, or for the listeners, pill abortions, were moving in that direction. I think that's something to look really closely at, but I think it's not necessarily directly tied to the Dobbs decision. I think that trend was already happening. But I think mostly, I'll say, here's the thing. Mostly, I would say that the pro-life movement had a big party and big celebration immediately after the Dobbs decision happened. And now, several years later, we were kind of like sold a bill of goods, right? At this point along the way, it's like, well, gosh, you know, we had ballot initiatives, both in Kansas and in Missouri, and across the nation in Ohio. Very few of these have actually gone the pro-life direction. And I think from a political perspective, we need to be ever vigilant and realize that they're coming after our states. Even these states that do not currently have initiative petition processes, they're coming after you, and they want to take away the, as we mentioned earlier, the legislature is the way that our republic was built, not necessarily on a, you know, majority rules, but the other side wants to just simply use majority rules in many of these different things. And sometimes that's just not good for our country.
Yes, we were very glad to see the tide begin to turn. You know, the last ballot measures that were in Florida and Nebraska and some of those other wins, where we saw good things begin to happen. I think that the pro-life movement kind of got caught off guard just with the level of misinformation that the abortion industry was willing to spread to really get these amendments across the finish line, that did, as you're saying, took it out of the hands of the people, took it out of the hands of those elected representatives, and in our case, turned it into this fundamental right to abortion that all stemmed, again, in our case, from one Kansas State Supreme Court decision that just decreed that would be so. So, yes. And to your point about the chemical abortions, Kansas situation, we actually were, I hate to say, ahead of the curve, because it's not a good thing. But, you know, we had 60% chemical abortions happening here in our state well before it started to spread across the country. So I totally agree with you that was already a trend that was in place, and is something that we're all still trying to figure out how to come back and really meet women before those pills are in their hands, or in the case that they have taken the first pill, getting them information about that abortion pill reversal process that can be very effective at saving that baby even after that chemical pill abortion process has begun. Very interesting. Yep. Okay. So I'm sure that, you know, just just like any other organization, you're always identifying the next challenges that are coming at you, and kind of what we're talking about here. We're trying to keep an idea of what is the pulse, what is, when we're looking at the national landscape and what the abortion industry is trying to deploy as different plans and different tactics in other places. What are you trying to prepare for in terms of challenges that you see coming at you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we saw it recently, of course, with the death of Charlie Kirk and many other, conservative, or violence against conservatives. I mean, we saw another school shooting, and so it keeps going on and on. So I think what I think we need to do is have conversations like this. We need to get out of our homes, and we need to get out of our computers, even though I'm sure many of people are either watching or listening on the computer or on the radio. But I think we need to have face-to-face conversations with people we may disagree with on a variety of different topics. But I think what has happened is that so much so we have been polarized as a country. I think there are thousands upon thousands of things that unite us as a country, and maybe a handful of things that divide us as a country. But I think what we really, really need to do is, and I think maybe that's that seems somewhat cliche. It's kind of a broader thing, but maybe a little bit more specific in the pro-life movement. We need to have a very specific strategy in a post-Roe world. We have to win ballot initiatives. The first ballot initiative, wave that we saw, we have to reverse those. In Missouri, just east of the great state of Kansas. In Missouri, there is now an opportunity with a brand new Amendment 3 on the ballot in November 2026. I think putting resources behind that, and substantial resources, is critically important. From a national perspective, we have to maintain the House and Senate. Whether or not we maintain the presidency next time around is a whole nother story, but we have to maintain the House and Senate. So a lot of resources need to be put into that. But I mean, that's all old hat. But what do we need to do differently, right? So differently is that I think we need to look at most of our pregnancy centers and where we provide these resources directly. And I think we need to make some serious decisions about enhancing them. So, at least in Missouri, there's about 80 pregnancy centers in Missouri. Across the nation, there's some 3,000 to 4,000 different variety of pregnancy centers around the nation. And I think we need to really step back and say, how is women's health care actually being distributed across our country? A great friend of mine, Leah Jacobson, has a project called the Guiding Start Project, where she's realized that there is birthing deserts, where around the country there are more and more places that you cannot give birth, at least not in a safe way. And then also a lot of these places where you might go to the hospital and give birth, it's like you're treated as a disease, and pregnancy is not a disease. Pregnancy is something that is part of the natural process of a woman, fulfilling one of God's beautiful opportunities for her, right? And so whether it's birthing centers, whether it's providing really good quality OBGYN services through our pregnancy centers, there's, for example, Bella Health and Wellness is out in Colorado. They are doing a phenomenal job of really building all of this into a really good quality women's healthcare process. Great people up in Ohio who I know, Carolyn Tucker, she's a nurse practitioner providing these. So I think what we need to do in a post-Roe world after the Dobbs decision is to encourage medical students, nurses, nurse practitioners, talk to these young people and say, look, we have to rebuild the entire medical system so that we can provide this long term. It's conservatives who are having babies. I mean, you look at it. those who call themselves liberals have about a 1% birth rate, or one per every a 1-to-1 for every woman who is of reproductive age. That is, on the conservative side, it's still about 2.4, and so we need places. Right now, the birthing centers in our country are mostly run by liberal individuals who may not have our values, and so this type of health care for conservatives, for people who love their children, I think that's really where the biggest opportunity is long term, including enhancing most of our pregnancy centers to provide these kind of medical services.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We so love our friends at APLOG, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, which
Absolutely.
are just absolutely, it's crazy how they're battling within their own profession to bring in, and we're talking about gynecologists and obstetricians who deliver babies, and yet their professional associations have been taken over by pro-abortion individuals, and these, what they're trying to promote through those professional associations is so counter to what you would assume they would want to be promoting, and that's birth. But we know that there are so many pro-life medical professionals out there who need the support. They need to find each other. They need to get connected with Dr. Christina Francis and those other friends who can, strengthen numbers, really start to take back those associations.
Well, I think we should just take the playbook out of the Federalist Society with Leonard Leo and the work that they did over the Federalist Society. Why do we have the Supreme Court judges that we have today? Is because they started 20, 30 years earlier working with students or young people and say, you know what, you could be a great attorney, and let's take care of you and educate you, and here's how you could be a good quality conservative constitutional attorney. And now many of them are judges all around the country, both federal judges, state judges, and also, of course, 3 noteworthy Supreme Court judges. So we should be doing this, start taking the next step in the medical profession, starting very young and ultimately educating them. Now, of course, that's not our niche, but I think for many of the people listening, if you're considering getting into the medical profession, consider women's healthcare in a variety of different things. And we need these people. We need, starting very young, we need you in the medical profession, especially in the women's healthcare.
Yes, and connected, networked with those pro-life OBGYNs, those other medical
100%.
professionals. Yeah. Find your tribe and connect, because they're so willing and want, they're training and doing all kinds of things to help those young medical professionals to become those life-affirming professionals. We need those good pro-life doctors and nurses and pharmacists as well.
And pharmacists.
Yeah. Okay, so let's pivot to talk about the newest part of your team. You've planted a team in Overland Park, Kansas. There is an abortion facility up here that is a large destination. Again, to what you're saying, as other states have been able to protect life more, they've almost become like travel agents, sadly, to send women here. And what you just said earlier about them only giving one-way tickets, that's news to me. That's very interesting, because to me that seems like almost a subtle form of coercion, that they would almost be, once they're here, they're stuck. And so that it just seems like a lot of pressure to have that abortion. But so tell us first about your team here and kind of what they're seeing on the ground and any particular challenges they're facing.
Yeah, first I'll address your travel agent idea. They actually have people that they have hired, and they call it their so-called logistics center. So they hired an entire group of people that have, basically act as travel agents for these individuals who be coming from other states. And so, of course, one of these places is in fact Overland Park, Kansas, there, where they are, flying or busing or getting them to come into Kansas. And, we were invited by our great friend, Archbishop Naumann. And of course, we got to know Ruth over at the now renamed Two Lines. And there's so much work to be done there. But when we entered the scene, we found there was a lot of pro-abortion individuals who decided that was the thing they just did. Like, that's just they're having some fun, and they're going to be the pro-life individuals that just like hit the ground and just yell and scream. And in fact, what we had found is that most of the pro-lifers were frustrated by the yelling and screaming, right? And
you're saying specifically by pro-abortion individuals.
By pro-abortion individuals. So pro-abortion individuals would come out and just yell and scream at the pro-lifers who were just there to pray. Were just there to offer a little bit of help. And at the time that, when we first entered the scene, everybody we talked to said, hey, we would never do that. Right? Well, maybe not everybody, but most people we talked to said, well, we would never do that because of this current situation of all this yelling and screaming and this frustration. And we said, well, we'll give it a try. And what we find is that when you are consistent and loving and caring and just over and over and over being consistent about being non-confrontational, love first. There's this, unofficial phrase I use. I say, I care more about you than the stuff you do. Very unofficial. You won't see it on a website somewhere. But if I love and care, truly love and care for my team, and then I say, look, we're going to model this as our leadership team. We're going to model to you that we literally love and care for you as our team on the ground. And we say, we want you to love and care for every single person you meet on that sidewalk, every person. And if you do that first, then we'll have great results. We're going to, God will just walk in the door and say, let's make this happen. We'll have some great results. We'll have some great conversations. And I think, that's one of our core values is to first show love. And so that doesn't mean we have to be excited about it, right? But here in Overland Park, we've seen a slow, steady, small change. It's not huge, but it's small and steady change where, people who used to come and just yell and scream, they just get discouraged because they want us to be angry, right? Because it's fun. I won't mention which one of my 8 children does this, probably all of them. And I'm sure some of the listeners' children as well. They poke their brother, they poke their sister, they say something stupid to their brother or sister. Why? To get a reaction out of them. But if we go out and and we just love them over and over and over and over, and they don't get some crazy reaction out of us, well, they stay home, they watch some sports game, or they don't come out. And that makes it even more productive in how we can have these conversations with these people, and we can love them every single day. Now, one of the things we are dealing with right now, which is I can't talk about in detail, but currently the police out there are or have been enforcing a panhandling ordinance against our team. And there's currently, they don't use the word panhandling inside the ordinance, but it's basically, they were trying to prevent homeless individuals from stepping into the street, stepping into the driveway, or those kind of things, and soliciting money from cars. And generally, this is something we don't really like, but this is something actually protected by the U.S. Constitution. And so we're currently in, a lot of conversations that I don't have privy to speak about right now. But, these conversations will be addressing this panhandling ordinance and addressing the issues and problems that we're having on the ground. So I hope, maybe you can bring me on again and we'll talk about some of the progress on that when we actually have some more news on that.
Very good. But your team in Overland Park is strong and growing?
Oh, Absolutely. Well, come on. Again, Coalition Life, we have both volunteers and staff members who do this work on a regular basis. We have a very robust training, both for staff and volunteers, and we record everything. Absolutely, we record all of our conversations, even about our, what are we going to have for dinners, Friday night, whatever it might be. But that allows for two things. So, every recording, we can go back and review for legal reasons. And there's been, I was just looking at recordings this morning about, a variety of different legal challenges that we have to deal with on a daily basis. So there's that. And then secondarily, we use it as training. And so we're in public right away. So there's no reason that we need to be concerned about recording. And so we can have these, we can go back and say, hey, you said this, and you maybe you could have, where you were off script or didn't quite say all the right things, and we can continue to train them based on what they had said. We love that. We love that opportunity to be able to continue to grow that. And so, hey, if you want to volunteer, you want to be able to join our staff, go to coalitionlife.com. And we have a huge event coming out nationwide. It's called Coalition Life Circle, and that would be coalitionlifecircle.com. And love to have you guys involved.
I want to go back for just a second about what you were saying in terms of consistent presence on the sidewalk and how that has helped to gradually decrease the opposition that your team is seeing there. I do think what that made me think of is you're reducing the reward that those individuals are trying to achieve, right? They're trying to get that reward, right, that response. They're trying to provoke, essentially. And I do think, consistent loving presence is a great way to diffuse that. So we don't want to reward that behavior. So I think that's an excellent path to take. And it really is. I know that there is a group of people who we all find, if you're passionate about the pro-life cause, you find a place to engage, and that place is different for everybody. Some people want to work on getting good people elected into office. Some people want to work on, making sure that the education, that more young people are learning about this cause. Some people are very called to go and have those interpersonal discussions, and there's a place for everyone. So, sidewalk counseling is a very worthy cause. Well, anything else you would like to share with our listeners today? I think you've covered a lot of things, but is there anything else that you wanted to make sure you said before we close out today?
Yeah, absolutely. I would encourage people to get out of their homes and do something. We cannot default to be laptop activist or cell phone activist or social media activist. I was recently at an event, and this is somewhat unrelated, but there's a big crisis in the trades: electricians, carpenters, people who want to be people who work with their hands, plumbers. This is why, you call up a plumber, it's $500 for the guy to come to your house to, do anything, because there's just fewer and fewer people in the trades. So that's completely unrelated, but I'll tie it back. There was a survey done related to work, and the current survey that we have says that the best job that young people want right now is to be a social media influencer. Top job, social media influencer. Are you kidding me? And when I was a kid, maybe it was to be a baseball, player or something like that. So what I would encourage the people who are listening today is we have to do the hard stuff. If anything, Mike Rowe taught us something with dirty jobs. So in the pro-life movement, I would encourage people to say, what's the toughest job I can take on, whether it's in the healthcare space, whether it's sidewalk counseling, whether it's in a pregnancy center where you're having really difficult conversations with individuals. The other side is all too willing to take on the very difficult jobs of knocking on doors and, really taking on these positions, especially political positions, where they're going to get yelled and screamed at, and they're going to get a lot of opposition. Well, we need good people to go and do these very difficult jobs, maybe not the most lucrative jobs, maybe not the coolest and cushiest jobs in the world, but we need them to go out and take a big, huge stand and do the hard stuff, whatever that hard stuff might be. And now is the time. We can't wait for tomorrow. We literally have to do it today. So if you're listening today, thinking about maybe taking a hard step, I'd encourage you to do so. Excellent.
And there's only one other thing I'd add to that, and those are very fulfilling jobs.
Yes.
Whether they're volunteer or that you've some kind of work that you get into professionally. I mean, this is the human rights issue of our time, and it's an amazing. We call it a battle because it is, but it's also, it's really a battle of ideas and beliefs and what we value. We're trying to battle for human hearts, and that's a very worthy calling. So, all right, well, wonderful. Where could people learn more about Coalition Life and follow you if they're interested in learning more, staying up to date?
Well, we're in a variety of different social media platforms, so I'm sure you can find us. But our website is coalitionlife.com, or if you are interested in our November prayer vigil across the country, that would be coalitionlifecircle.com. And our team loves doing this work. We love doing this work, and we want to hear from you, any kind of feedback you have, or if you want to, across the country, want to start some sidewalk counseling around the country, we'd love to help you do that. And Coalition Life is, we're ready to take the next step. And we can't thank you enough, Danielle. You're fantastic, and the work you do there in Kansas is incredible. So thank you, and thank you to all the listeners.
Well, thank you so much, Brian Westbrook. We are thrilled that you came on the show today. Very glad to have you with us, and thank you for sharing all this great information with us. Thank you to all of you who are listening and sharing this podcast to your friends and family. If you haven't already, please hit the like button or leave us a 5-star review to keep this podcast growing. You can stay up to date with KFL and where we're heading next at kfl.org, and on social media at Kansans for Life on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. Until next time, never forget, the pro-life movement is on the right side of history. Stay strong. The truth will overcome. Thanks, friends, and we'll see you soon.